My name's Moriah Ward, and I'm doing a presentation on whether or not doctors should use BMI to assess health, and I am on the con side of the argument. So first we should talk about what BMI is. It stands for Body Mass Index, and it is a measure of weight. It is used by calculating your height and your weight. You can see the formula for them is on the right side of the screen. But it's used as to get an estimate of body fat and can gauge your risk for diseases that can occur when you have more body fat. So typically the higher your BMI is, the higher risk you are for having certain diseases like heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, breathing problems, and other kinds of cancers. A lot of doctors will use it to assess some of these things. So what is the problem with using body mass index? So the calculations that come from body mass index do not directly measure the percentage of body fat. So BMI can overestimate body fat in some individuals with higher than expected muscle mass. It can also underestimate the body fat percentage for people who have less muscle mass. It also does not take into account the distribution of body fat. So a person who weighs a lot, or for example, a guy who works out his upper arms a lot, or upper body strength, could be seen as overweight by using body mass because it's not taking into account where the distribution of his body fat is or how much muscle that he has compared to actual body fat. So it's not always the most accurate thing because it's not taking those sorts of things into account. So as a result of that, there are several people who are negatively affected by using body mass index to assess health. So BMI doesn't take into account age, gender, or the amount of muscle mass a person has. And it also doesn't distinguish between lean body mass and fat mass. So people like athletes who may have a high BMI could be, just by their body mass index, like the number that comes from that, could be classified as overweight because it doesn't take into account that muscle mass. There's also people, like elderly people, who may appear to have a normal BMI, but they could have lost a lot of weight with aging and could potentially be seen as underweight or overweight depending on the person. Women who are pregnant and also children can be negatively affected by body mass. So children, but typically for body mass, there's like a set numbers. So if adults from certain ages or demographics, there's like what their normal BMI should be, someone who's overweight or someone who's underweight, they all have kind of like a range of numbers that they should fit in. For children, you can't have that because all children are different based off of age and ethnicities. And some kids are also growing every month, and so it's not accurate because it doesn't stay the same over a long period of time. And there's also really no comparisons for children because they're all different, and also kids get like their growth spurts at different times. So it's hard to say that, especially for adolescent kids, because growth spurts can happen really early for kids or can happen really late. So girls who are the same age and could weigh the same but are at different ages, one could be seen as overweight and one, could not be seen as overweight. It also cannot be used for, or shouldn't be used for, women who are pregnant, mostly because they're gaining a lot of weight in a short amount of time. And if you use just the numbers of the weight like that they're gaining, without taking that into account, you could easily classify them as being overweight, when really a lot of the weight that they are gaining is needed for the baby's health, or it's just the baby gaining weight over time. But typically a lot of the weight that women gain during pregnancy is good weight, and it's needed, and it's important for the nutrition of the child. So you may wonder why BMI is used if so many people are negatively affected by using it. But for one, it's really easy to use and it requires little training and expertise. Anyone can calculate their BMI by either using the formula shown on the other slide, or there's a lot of websites where you can just enter in your weight and your height and it will calculate it for you. So it's very easy to use. One of the other reasons that it's inexpensive because it doesn't require any equipment except for a scale and a tape measure, which there's a lot of places that have scales where you can just get weighed for free, or if you have a friend or something who has a scale if you don't have one. It's obviously easy to use because you just step on the scale, but otherwise it doesn't require any other equipment to measure your body fat or anything. There's some methods that require like a bathtub or different things to check water displacement, but for BMI you don't need any of that. BMI can also be used globally to measure mass populations. So because it's so easy to use and so inexpensive, it can be used worldwide. But again, the problem with that is there's so many groups of people and so many demographics that it doesn't work. So is it really worth it to have an inaccurate measurement of a mass population just because it's easy to use or inexpensive? So those are typically the reasons why BMI is used. However, there are several solutions that we can do to use instead of using BMI. There's a new measurement and it's called BAI. It stands for Body Adiposity Index. And it's instead of using, or with BMI, you get a relative number to assess body fat. But when you use the BAI, you get a number which is the actual percentage of fat. So what you do is you take the hip measurement and then, like the circumference of your hip, and then you divide it by your height in inches squared. And obviously you just follow the formula that is up here on the screen. And it's just as easy to use. It's actually not even using a scale, so all you need is a tape measure to use this one. And it's a more accurate number than the BMI, but also just as effective, and again can be used across the world because it is so inexpensive and requires no training. You just need to be able to plug it in the information to the formula that's provided here. Another method that can be used is the waist to hip ratio. You use your natural waistline and then the widest part of your hips, and both of those have to be used in the measurements. And then once the measurements are taken, you just divide the waist measurement by the hip measurement. So the chart above just has like the numbers. So if you take those numbers and you divide them and it's 0.95 or below for a male, then you have low risk for any health risks. You're at low risk for any health risks. And then you just follow through the chart and put your number into the chart to figure out, which category you belong in. And here is a YouTube video that shows you how to use that.
Hip to waist ratio. We're going to demonstrate how to measure the hip to waist ratio. You need to take and one at the hips, slightly below the hip bones, but not the bottom. To measure the waist, stand to one side and use the navel as a reference point. Take your reading. You may find an ergonomic tape useful for self-measurement and consistent tension. They are easy to use and can be supplied by IDAS. To measure your hip, identify the hips below the ellip crest and take the measurement.
So like the video showed, it's also a very easy method to use and just requires a tape measure in order to um, find out the calculations. And then there's charts like these and the one shown in the video that you just place your number into one of the categories and then just figure out your risk for different health diseases. So in conclusion, although BMI is quick and efficient and also cheap, so it can be used around for tons of different demographics, it's not always accurate, and it also is not accurate for several groups of people, which also make up a large portion of the population, not just in the United States but around the world. Um, and so it doesn't seem like it should be used even though it's cheap and effective. If it's not accurate, there's really no point in using it. And the methods provided before are just as easy, just as simple to use, and you just need those formulas to plug in, and it has the same effect for the fact that it's cheap, but it's more accurate than using BMI. Thank you.